Hello, our most valued student. My name is Confident. Welcome to our 24-minute lesson. In this lesson, we are going to look at the memorandum discussion of the mathematics N3 paper, which was written in 2019. This paper was written in July 2019. As you can see, it was written on the 31st of July 2019, and by X paper they mean it is a morning paper, and the time allocated for you to write this paper is 3 hours, which is from 9 o'clock in the morning to 12 o'clock. Now, as I said, this is a national exam under the Department of Higher Education. Let us quickly look at what is important before you start to answer the paper, or what you need to be aware of. As I said, it is a 3-hour paper, and this paper is out of 100 marks. Now, it is important for you to always read the instructions so that you don't get things wrong. Now, let us quickly look at the instructions that you are expected to know. The first part says you must answer all the questions, which means you need not to select some of the questions, but you have to answer all the questions. You need to read all questions carefully. Number 3 says number the answers according to the numbering system used in the question paper, which means do not come with your own numbering. You need to maintain the numbering system that is used in the paper. When you come with your own numbering, you might get penalized. Instruction number 4, it says questions may be answered in any order, but do not separate the subsections. Meaning, if you want to start with question number 3, for example, you can start with question number 3, but ensure that you answer everything that pertains to question number 3. Don't answer part of question number 3 and leave it and answer it after you have written another answer or another question, because it will cause confusion. So be careful. When you start with any particular number of the question, you need to finish all the subsections. Instruction number 5 says you need to show all your calculations and intermediate steps. So don't lose some of your working in your rough paper. Sometimes you find students working on that the paper that you are given, you'll be working on top of it. But the thing is, do not leave your working on that paper. You need to show all your calculations so that you can get all your marks. Sometimes your answer might be wrong, but your steps were correct, so you might actually get some part marks. Hence, they want you to show all the intermediate steps. Instruction number 6 says all graph work must be done in the answer book. No graph paper is needed. So in N3, you must remember that they don't offer you any graph paper. You need to sketch. It's a rough sketch in the answer book that you're provided. It is in N1 and N2 where you are using a graph paper. Number 7 says all final answers must be accurately approximated to 3 decimal places. So if they don't specify how many decimal places you need to leave your answer, remember to leave your answer in 3 decimal places. And then it says number 8, diagrams are not drawn to scale, so don't use your ruler to measure the diagrams. And the last one, which is also important because you can lose marks, it says write neatly and legible. Please make sure that your writing is neat, otherwise they will penalize you. Now let us then go and look at how this question paper fared. In other ways, I'm going to show you some strategies or some ways you could have approached this paper if you were a candidate then, and I will encourage you to go through this revision as it will help you to prepare for your own exams. Now let's start with the first question. Question number 1, and in question number 1 we have question 1.1. Now if we're looking at question 1.1, it says prove that x minus 1, so you are proving that x minus 1 is a factor of f of x, and then factorize completely if f of x is equal to that. So that is what you have been given. And then the first thing though, this question or this particular problem is divided into two parts. The first one we are supposed to prove, and then the second one we are supposed to factorize. So let's start by the proving part. Now, how do you prove that it is a factor? So the first thing you need to do is for you to say you equate that x minus 1, you must equate it to 0. That's how you approach it. And then the next thing is to solve for x. In other ways, the 1 must jump the equal sign so that from negative it will become positive. So now we have got x is equal to 1. So that is the first step. Now the next thing that you are supposed to do then is for you to be able now to substitute f of 1. Remember, they are saying f of x is equal to 6x cubed minus 11x squared plus x plus 4. So this is what you are given. Now you are told that x is equal to 1. So now you can find f of 1. Therefore, you are going to substitute where there is x, you are going to put a 1, which is 6, 1 cubed minus 11, 1 squared plus 1 plus 4. So then you need to use your calculator. So you can use the calculator. I will pull out my calculator in this case and substitute. I will also encourage you to know your calculator. You can follow the steps that I'm using. So it's 6x cubed minus 11x, and my x is a 1 squared plus 1 plus 4. Now the answer that I'm getting, as you can see, I'm getting a 0. So you are going to say equal to 0. Therefore, if f of 1 is equal to 0, it means x minus 1 is a factor. Remember, you need to conclude. Don't just leave your answer as equal to 0. You need to conclude what is your finding. And our finding in this case is that x minus 1 is a factor of f of x. Now we have answered the first part. Remember, this is 5 marks. So you'll get your first mark there to say x minus 1 is a factor. Then the next part says factorize completely. So now we are going to factorize. Now how do we factorize this expression? We're going to do a long division. And with a long division, remember, this is a revision. If you want the full lessons on how to approach these problems, then you need to follow my lessons on factorizing these kind of problems, and you'll be able now to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. So now this is what you do. You have your x minus 1 there, and your f of x is the one that you write here as your 6x cubed minus 11x squared plus x plus 4. So basically, this is how you approach it. So now let us do the long division. How does it go? You are going to say x into, or 6x cubed divided by x. So if you divide 6x cubed by x, the x will cancel from the cubed. 1 will cancel to remain with 2. So you will have 6x squared. So if I can do on top, it's 6x cubed divided by x. As you can see, 1x will cancel to remain with 2. That is where I said it is 6x cubed. So basically that's what you're doing. So you are going to have 6x cubed, and then the next thing what you're going to do is to multiply 6x cubed by x and by minus 1. In other ways, again, you are going to have something like this. You have 6x cubed into x minus 1. So when you expand and when you expand, that's what you're doing. So when we are multiplying backwards, it is what actually we are doing. So now let's multiply 6x cubed by x. We're going to get 6x cubed. Actually, 6x squared plus x is 6x cubed. and the next one is 6x squared times minus 1. It is minus 6x squared. When you have done that, the next thing is to underline or rule off. You subtract and you introduce brackets. Don't forget, you underline, you subtract and introduce brackets. If you forget brackets, you're going to confuse this negative sign, because you must distribute this negative both to the 6 as well as to the negative 6. So don't forget, it is important for you to introduce the negative sign. So now we are going to subtract 6x cubed. In this case, I'm subtracting 6x cubed minus 6x cubed, and I will say the next one, negative 11x squared minus 6x squared. So that's what actually I'll be doing. So the first one is, must always give you a 0, which is 6x cubed minus 6x cubed. It must always give you a 0. And then the second one, you can use your calculator if it's confusing you. Remember, it is minus 11 minus bracket minus 6. So if you do that, you are going to get a negative 5. So now you are going to have negative 5x squared. When you have done that, you are going to bring down the positive x. So you are going to have as it is plus x. Again, you repeat the first step, x into negative 5x squared. In other ways, you're saying minus 5x squared over x. The x will cancel. There are two of them, then one will cancel to remain with 1x. So in other ways, we have got minus 5x in this case. And then you repeat the process. Remember, how did we repeat the process? We multiplied in this direction. So the negative 5 will multiply the x, and the negative 5 will multiply the negative 1. So you are repeating the process. So in this case, minus 5x times x will give you minus 5x squared. This one must always match because it must give you a 0. And minus 5x times negative 1, a negative multiplied by a negative, it is a positive 5x. After that, remember, you roll off, you put a negative, and you introduce brackets. So minus 5, this is a 0. You can prove with a calculator. In this case, if I take my calculator, I can say minus 5 minus 5, and you can see I'm getting a 0. And then the other one, I've got x minus plus 5x, so which is x represent, remember, where there is x there is a 1, which is 1 minus bracket plus 5, which you get a negative 4. So in this case, we are going to have a negative 4x. And then what do you bring down? You also again bring down the 4. So in this case, we are going to bring down the positive 4. And then you repeat again the process, x into minus 4x, or negative 4x divided by x. So you have got negative 4x, and you're dividing by x. You can see now in this time you are cancelling x, and you're going to remain with negative 4. So I'm going to get, in this case, a negative 4, and then I repeat the multiplication again, in which case I'm having minus 4 into x minus 1. That's what actually I'm doing. So it's minus 4 times x and minus 4 times minus 1. So minus 4 times x, I get minus 4x, and minus 4 times minus 1, you can still get your calculator and multiply negative 4 times negative 1. Remember, two negatives, you give you a positive, which is a positive 4. So basically, That is what you can see that it's a step that involves repetition. So if you master the first step, you can always repeat all the stages. Once you've got that, you do the same thing. You underline, put a negative, introduce brackets. Again, -4 minus -4. We establish that that is a 0. And the next one is +4 minus +4. You can say that it's a 0, but as I said, your calculator is a help. So you've got +4 minus bracket +4. You can see that it's a 0. So you need to always understand your algebra. So you have got 0 plus 0. Now the fact that we got 0, it means the remainder is a 0. It means your factorizing was correct. So if you don't get a 0, it means you made an error. So moving ahead, remember the question said factorize completely. So now what we have, I can write it with another pen now. What you are having is you are having x minus 1 and 6x squared minus 5x minus 4. So remember, they told us that this is f of x. So f of x now is equal to that. And the next thing you need to do is for you now to factorize. And what are you factorizing further? You need to factorize further this part because it is not fully factorized. So what do we have? You have got 6x squared minus 5x minus 4. And usually when I'm factorizing this, I use the product sum method. My product is I take these two numbers, I multiply them, and my sum is that center. I will encourage you again to go through my lesson where I teach the product sum method so that you can understand. So P stands for my product, which is 6x squared times minus 4, which is negative 24x squared. And my sum, which is plus, to sum, the word sum means to add. So the sum is the center number, which is negative 5x. Now, the factors of 24, I'm going to look for the factors of 24. Now, the factors of 24, again, let me get some space. The factors of 24 are, if I can get the factors of 24, it's 1 times 24, it's 2 times 12, you start with the smaller numbers, it's 3 times 8, it's 4 times 6, 5 won't do, and then it's 6 times 4. The moment you repeat the numbers, 4 and 6 and 6 and 4 is the same. It means you have exhausted all the factors. So now what you need to find out, you take your calculator. With the calculator, you play around all of these factors. Remember, the product means when we multiply all these numbers, they give me a 24, but I need to get a negative 24. It means one of them must be negative, which is not a problem. But the decider of one of these factors is the sum must be negative 5. So there will always be one factor. Now, if you can see, 1 and 24 will never give me a sum of negative 5. Even if I say 1 plus 24 or 24 minus 1, I will never get a 5. 2 and 12 also will never give me a 5. 3 and 8, we can pause there. You can see that 3 and 8 can give me a 5. Move on. 4 and 6. 4 and 6 cannot give me a 5 even if I subtract them. But 3 and 8 can give me a 5. So if I say 8 minus 3, I get a 5. But my key is to get a negative 5, which means I must say 3 minus 8. So it's a negative 5. It means my 3 must be positive and my 8 must be negative. And just look again, if you say 3 times negative 8, you're going to get a negative 24. So these factors, they meet two conditions. If 3 is positive and 8 is negative, if you add them, you get a negative 5, you tick. If you multiply them, you get a negative 24. You tick. It means those are the factors. Now, when you have done that, then you're going to rewrite it as 6x squared minus 5x minus 4 is equal to 6x squared. Now, where there is minus 5x, you come back to your factors here, and in each you put x and you put x. So in other ways, you are going to have a plus 3x minus 8x minus 4. Now remember, this plus 3x minus 8x is the one that is representing the negative 5x. So if you continue, we are going to then factorize. How do you factorize? You take the first two and you also consider the last two. So we are factorizing by grouping, which again, as I said, is the previous lesson that we did. So if you take the first two, what is common between 6x squared plus 3x? You can see that 3x is common. And in that, 3x into 6x squared, it is 2x plus 3x into 3x is a 1. And then the next thing, what is common, you can see we've got negative 8 and negative 4. So the negative is common. 8 and 4, so the 4 is common. So negative 4 divided by negative 8x, it is again 2x. Negative 4 divided by negative 4, it is a positive 1. So you will always get the brackets that are similar. It is a must. If the brackets are not similar, it means you are not factorizing correctly. So if you move on, we are going then to write the bracket 1, which is 2x plus 1. And what is outside the brackets? You can see you have got 3x and you have got minus 4. So you are going to have 3x minus 4. So now you have managed to factorize. Now if I can write the whole expression of f of x, I can move on here to say f of x is equal to x minus 1, 2x plus 1 and 3x minus 4. So now you have completely factorized the function of f of x, in which initially, if you go back, you are given it as 6x cubed minus 11x squared plus x plus 4, and you have managed to factorize from that into that. That's what they mean when they say factorize completely. Now let us move on to our next problem. It was question 1.2, and see what they were trying to trick you about. It was a question with 2 marks. Now what was it dealing with? Now we are given, again, it's a factorizing problem. It says factorize the following algebraic expression. Again, the key word there is as far as possible in prime factors. So if you have to factorize something as far as possible, they are trying to say make sure that you cannot factorize this further. So they are giving it as a plus b squared minus 2 into a plus b plus 1. Now one of the easiest ways, you can see that this is 2 marks, but it looks a bit complicated. So don't be tempted to open the brackets. So the most common thing about this question, we call it use the K method. And what do we mean by saying use the K method? Now you are given a plus b squared minus 2a plus b plus 1. So if you use the K method, it becomes easier for you to understand what you're dealing with. So what does it mean? You say let a plus b is equal to k. That's what we mean by the K method. So where there is a plus b, you are going to put the k, and here you are going to put the k. So in other ways, now you are having k squared minus 2k plus 1. That's why we say it's the K method. After that, you are going to use the product sum method to factorize. Remember, I told you about the product sum. You multiply the first and the last. your multiply is the product, and the center one is the positive, which is the sum. So if I look at the product, my product is 1k squared, and my sum is minus 2k, and my factors, now the factors of 1 is 1 times 1. Now how can I get a 2 from 1 and 1? Obviously it's 1 plus 1, but I need a negative 2, which is minus 1 minus 1. Let me verify that with my calculator. If I say minus 1 minus 1, you can see I get a negative 2, but if I come and say minus 1 times minus 1, I get a positive 1. So which means those are the factors and the signs. So if I continue, I will then have, remember, it's minus 1x minus 1x. So I'm going to have k squared minus 1x minus 1x plus 1. So actually it's not x in this case. I'm making an error. It's k. So it's k minus 1k minus 1k, because it's the k method, minus 1k. So here I'm supposed to have a k and a k. So the next thing, k is common in the first. As you can see, it's k squared minus 1k. So if I look at the first two and look at the last two, so in the first two, k is common, which is k minus 1. Now remember, I must get a similar bracket. Let's say I'm taking out a plus. What is common in 1k and 1? It's 1. So I'll have minus k plus 1. Now something is not the same, and this is the sign. K is positive in the first bracket and k is negative in the second bracket, but remember, you need to match them. So when you do that, you will have k minus 1, and then you take out a negative, and that particular negative will affect the sign. The sign was positive, but now it will turn into a negative, and everything inside the brackets will now interchange the signs. What was negative will become positive, what was positive will become negative. Now you can see this is k minus 1 and that is k minus 1. Remember, that is very important. So now you are going to have k minus 1, which is inside the bracket, and outside the bracket we are having that, but you can put a 1 as a placeholder. Again, you are going to have k minus 1. But remember, do not leave your answer like this, because you are not only dealing with k. You say it, let k be a plus b. So where there is k, you can move on to say, therefore where there is k, it is a plus b minus 1 and a plus b minus 1, which is equal to a plus b minus 1 squared. Even if you leave your answer like that, they will mark you because you have factorized. So this is one of the easier way you could have factorized that particular problem. Now let us move on again. This is still question 1. Now we are looking at question 1.3, and in question 1.3 it had two parts. There is 1.3.1, and also later we'll look at 1.3.2. Now let us look at the first one. We are supposed to simplify the following. So you are given a fraction. In this case, you are given the top part, and I want you to take note of the division. So you have got two kind of division. You have the top one and we have the middle one, and also from the middle one you have the bottom one. So it's kind of like you have got three different types of divisions, and these you need not to confuse yourself. Also added are the sign. You have got addition and subtraction. So how do you approach such a problem? The best thing to do, it is to ignore this division and focus on this particular division I'm saying. In other ways, you are going to have, or you are going to rewrite this as 1 over square root of a plus 3 over square root of a. You put that in brackets, and then you say divided by, which is this particular division that I'm telling you about. So you're going to say divided by, you also put brackets as 7 over square root of a minus 3 over square root of a. So this is the approach, and the solution or the key is this particular division, which is that particular division. We're going to work on the second option, whereby we are not going to focus on that division as such, but this is the best way to approach it. I will encourage you to follow this part. Now, in this particular solution, you can see in the denominator, on the first fraction, you have got square root of a, which means square root of a is the denominator, which is common. So you're going to have square root of a. Now you need to know how to work your fractions. If you don't, there are some lessons that I've done on solution or simplifying of fractions. It will help you a lot if you can go through those lessons. Now we are saying it's a square root of a into square root of a is 1. 1 times 1, it is 1, plus square root of a into square root of a, which is our common denominator, is again 1. 1 times 3, which we'll get 3 later, and then we say this is divided by, again, square root of a is the common denominator. Square root of a into that, it's 1 times 7, minus square root of a into that is 1 times 3. I think you can see how this thing is going about. So 1 times 1, which is 1, plus 1 times 3 is 3, so it's 1 plus 3, which is 4 over square root of a, divided by, again, this is 7 minus 3, which is 4 over square root of a. So basically, that is what you're having. If I can get a bit of space on that, you can further then, where the solution is, you need then to convert this division sign into a multiplication sign. So the key is to convert that. Remember how to convert. It is 4 over square root of a times, then you interchange, a goes up and 4 goes down, which becomes square root of a over 4. Then when you have done that, the 4 cancels the 4, the square root of a cancels the square root of a, and the answer is equal to a 1. So that is how you simple can solve that. So it wasn't really much of a complicated thing. You just need to understand your fractions. Now, I talked of this as the simplest method that I will advise, but well, there is another option you could have dealt with. Now, in this particular option, you could have rewritten it as it is. You could have gone for 1 over square root of a plus 3 over square root of a divided by 7 over square root of a minus 3 over square root of a. So you focus on the top. Now the common denominator, as we said, on the top is square root of a, which is 1 times 1 plus 1 times 3. Remember how we're getting this, and then you have your big division line. Again, you have got your square root of a at the bottom as the common denominator. We have 1 times 7 minus 1 times 3. So basically, you can see that as you are working with this, it's a bit long going down, but you just have to make sure that you don't confuse yourself. And then when you continue, you are going to have 1 times 1 is 1 plus 3, so you're going to have 4 over square root of a all over. Again, you're going to have 4 over square root of a. So that's how it's like 4 over square root of a over 4 over square root of a. Then you can cancel that. That into that is 1. So the answer becomes a 1. And then the last part I want to give you a hint is, how do you prove that your answer is correct? Well, one of the things that I usually do, I usually use a trial method. For example, I can say, suppose a, this is just an assumption, suppose a is equal to, let's say, 10. You can choose any number that you think of, and then you take a calculator. After you suppose that a is equal to 10, you try to punch that whereby where there is a, you substitute with a 10. So I'm going to have 1 over square root of 10. Play forward, be careful how you punch that, plus fraction again, 3 over square root of a, which is, remember my a is 10, go down, play forward and go down, and then again we have a fraction which is 7 over square root of 10, then minus 3 over square root of 10. So you see, I was putting square root of 10 everything, and my answer must give me a 1. If it doesn't give me a 1, it means my solution is wrong. So that's how I prove that my final answer is indeed equal to 1. You can see that whatever number you can change, you can choose any number. Maybe now we can put 990 there. If I can put again 9 there, as I said, it must be any number. If I put 9 there and I put a 9 there, you can see that it gives me a 1. So whatever number, as long as it is following the same pattern, you are still going to get a 1, which means my answer is correct. Now let us move on to the next question. The subsection of 1.3, which is 1.3.2, it was 7 marks, meaning it was indeed worth looking at carefully. And as you can see, the total now is 16, meaning this is the end of question number 1. When you get the 7 marks, it means you are now good to go to get your 16 marks correct. So with the 7 marks, you definitely need to be careful. You don't just want to work without taking attention to some of the little things that usually can cost you marks. It's again, simplify the following. So now, how do you go about simplifying this problem? Now I'm going to do it in parts. I'm going to look at each and every individual part separately. Now let us start by looking at the top. At the top, you are given negative ax minus bx plus by plus ay. So when I'm given that, the first thing that comes into my mind is to factorize by grouping. So I can group that and I can group that and find the final the final answer of factorizing. Now what is common in minus ax minus bx? You can see x is common, not only x, also the negative, because it's negative and negative, so negative is common. So I'm going to have a plus b. Now in the next one, what is common in positive by and positive ay? It's positive y, and I'm going to have a plus b. I know it is b plus a, but it doesn't matter because it's positive. Even if you say b plus a and a plus b is the same thing. So now you are having what is inside the brackets. It's a plus b, and what is outside the bracket, you have got negative x and positive y. So you need to write it carefully. Because y is positive, you're going to have y minus x, or minus x plus y. It can be another way of writing that. So you have done the first one, you're good to go. Now let's focus on the second one. On the second one, which is the denominator is already factorized, so I mean it's simplified. We can do nothing about it, we can leave it like that. Let us go on to look at the next part, which is the numerator of the next fraction, and we are given 2a squared minus 3ab minus 5b squared, and you are supposed to factorize. Now let not this the ab and the b squared confuse you. You just focus on the 2, the -3 and the -5, and do the product sum method. I told you when I'm doing the product sum method, I focus on the first and the last numbers. I have to multiply them to give me a product, and I focus on the center to give me the sum. Now my product, in this case, product means times, is 2 times minus 5, it's -10. Then you just write a squared b squared, but these must not even confuse you. The key thing to focus on is -10. And then my sum, which is positive, sum means positive, and then it is -3. That's the number that is important, but we just have to write our AB because we are dealing with algebra. So now when I've done that, I then move on to look at the factors, and on the factors I'm looking at the factors of 10, which is 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. Those are the only factors of 10, and from these, when I multiply them, I must get a -10, which means one of the numbers must be negative. But the key one is the sum, which says when I add those two numbers, I must get a -3. So if I take my calculator, you can see that the first factor will not give me that. The first factor is 1 and 10. 1 and 10 cannot give me a 3, but the second factor is interesting. The 2 and 5, I need to get a 3 and -3. So if I say 2 minus 5, you can see that I'm getting a -3, which means 5 must be negative and 2 must be positive. Remember, we are dealing with AB, so in this case, you just put here your AB and you put here your AB. That's how you go about it. If you continue working on that one, we are then going to have 2a squared here, 2a squared minus 3ab minus 5b squared, which then becomes 2a squared. Now remember, minus 3ab, it is plus 2ab minus 5ab minus 5b squared. Then I'm factorizing by grouping again. Take the first two and take the last two. So what do I have in the first two? What is common is 2a, and then 2a into 2a squared, it's a, plus 2a into 2ab, it's b. And then what is next is minus 5ab minus 5b squared, so the negative 5b is common. And then similarly, I'm going to get an a plus b. You can see that the a plus b is maintained, which means I'm correct. So I'm going to get my a plus b, and I'm going to get my 2a minus 5b. So this is my final answer. Now we do the last one, and the last one is the denominator of that fraction. If I can work on it, I'm given 8a squared minus 50b squared. Now if you don't check this carefully, you will not see that this is a difference of two squares, but you need to be familiar with this kind of scenarios, because this is a difference of two squares which is hidden. How do I know? Let us take a 2 or factorize a 2 from 8 and 50. you will see that 2 into 8, I get a 4a squared minus 25b squared. And there we go, the difference of two squares. Remember, 4 is a square, which is 2 squared a squared, and 25 is a square, is a square of 5, which is 5 squared b squared. Do you see what I meant when I say this is a hidden difference of two squares? So when you have done that, you can now write it as a final difference of two squares. What does it become? It becomes 2. So you open two brackets. Now you write, forget about those squares. Forget about those squares. What do you see? You see 2a and you see 5b. Again, you repeat it, 2a and 5b. The first one, you maintain the sign is negative. The second one, you oppose the sign, it becomes positive. That's how you solve that difference of two squares. Now, when you have done all of this, the next final thing now is for you to be able then to pull it all together so that you can be able to solve and get the final solution. So if I can do that, let me now try to create some space. Now is to pull from the final. Remember, it was minus ax from the top. So what I got from the top, when I factorized it, I got a plus b, and I got y minus x over x minus y. Now the next important thing for you to look at is we have a division sign, but I'm going to change the division sign into a multiplication sign, and when I do that, the bottom will go to the top and the top will go to the bottom. So with that, I'm going to have the 8a squared minus 50b squared going to the top, which is the factorized version of that, which is 2. I've got 2 into 2a minus 5b and 2a plus 5b. You see that? Divided by, and then the top one, I got that as a plus b and then into 2a minus 5b. And then I move on. I can scratch out or cancel out what is the same. A plus b will cancel a plus b, and 2a minus 5b will cancel 2a minus 5b. And then now if you can continue, you can see I've got y minus x and x minus y. Those are two different things. Now the key is to match them. The first is to take out a negative in the top one. When I take out a negative, the signs will interchange. The y will become negative and the x will become positive. So I'll have x minus y all over x minus y times, you saw what remained here was a 2 into 2a plus 5b after everything cancelled. Now you can move on then to cancel that x minus y and that x minus y because it is matching, but what you achieved, you were left out with a negative 1 in here, and then your answer then will become negative 2 into 2a plus 5b. So where did they want to catch you there? They wanted to catch you on that negative sign. If you're not careful, you're going to get bent in that. So basically, as I said, we have come to the end of our lesson because the end of the question is usually shown by the total marks. When you say the total marks, it means it was all the questions that were made up of question number 1. And With this practice, trust me, if you do more of these, you'll be able to ace your exams. We've come to the end of our lesson. Thank you.